Welcome to Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with cartoonist and musician Ron Regé. Enjoy.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for taking the time out.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So you live out in LA, right?
I do. I've been here for 20 years this year.
Wow. 20 years.
Mm-hmm. But I'm not a native.
What has your experience been in 20 years? Must be wild. You know, I've been there for like 2 months max, I think. And it was,
Right.
yeah.
Probably. Well, it takes a good 5 years for it to really like settle in. You may have noticed that. Like when I came here to visit before, like I had no like handle on the place. And even just moving here, it takes you a while before you like know where every part of town is and stuff like that because it's so big.
Certainly. I feel that way about traveling in general now.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't even... It's interesting. I'm 35, but I'm already seeing...
What you need to see or something?
I don't know. Yeah, it's not as cynical as that. It's just like a realization that traveling often is like skimming the surface of an experience. And by no means is it truly experiencing the country or place that you are purporting to see. And then even I lived in Philly for 4 or 5 years, and what I experienced of that was so minimal in some ways.
Right, sure.
That I'm even confused about the nature of travel sometimes now, or why I do it. I don't really travel as much anymore, but
right.
There's like this craving for vertical depth, I find, as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you feel that way as well.
It's hard to tell, like post-pandemic and travel and stuff like that. It seemed a little bit more difficult or something.
Sure.
And I wonder, but like I've had this crazy career between the comics and the music where like I can't afford a plane ticket ever. Like I'm not somebody I live pretty hand to mouth and cheaply, but I've been all over the world, I have a very good handle on the Northern Hemisphere. I've been all around it, and
it's a good hemisphere. It's a good hemisphere.
Sure. I'd like to maybe check out the other one. I'm waiting for that to happen.
No, but it is more beautiful to travel in that way.
Yeah.
For doing something. But yeah, I mean, it seems it's not surprising to hear, but because you're very prolific and consistent, it seems to me. But I also understand that you're probably not making large sums of money in either endeavor.
Yeah.
But at what age were you able to rely on these things solely?
Also, that's funny because it's around the same time as moving to LA. It was like 2 years before that. I had day jobs. I guess I was in my early 30s. And I was doing a bunch of illustration work at the same time as having a day job and, like doing 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. And then I moved back to the East Coast I was living in the Bay Area. And I quit my job and then just was like, oh, I can, I saved up from having a day job, and like, oh, I'll live off my savings and do the art thing. And now it's, like 22 years later. But yeah. It's subsistence living.
Yeah, I mean, given the nature of what you're making.
Yeah. And I've always figured, it's been a very long time. I've always figured that I would do some other thing, be it teaching or have some other, employment. But I've solely just been going from like one art project to another. Yeah, for a little over 20 years.
Well, that's great. No?
Oh, sure.
So if you had to do something else, you think you'd be a teacher?
It just seems like something for artists. It's often an option, especially, like in doing something like comics and stuff like that. It seems like something that I could probably, if I pursued, maybe would be able to do.
Yeah, no, I understand. What were the jobs beforehand? I'm always curious to know what people had to do to get to this place.
Well, I grew up in Boston, and I worked in a Xerox shop in Harvard Square for over a decade.
Wow.
That's my whole story with the 90s. Yeah, it was a pre-internet time, and I was the guy who made the Xeroxes, for the people in the bands and this and that and the movie theaters, and it was all this kind of indie culture stuff happening. But I was able to make any kind of mini comic I wanted to for a decade. And eventually I was the weekend manager and I was in charge and stuff like that. And that's how that's how my comics career started. I didn't really have any intention of ever doing anything other than that. It's just time went on and graphic novels happened and I knew people publishing and stuff like that. Then I ended up making books, but yeah.
So you didn't start off with a careerist ambition. It just slowly
occurred.
There
wasn't one.
Yeah.
That didn't exist. There was no graphic novelist that was making money. There were guys who made comic books with characters and stuff like that. They're known, sure, indie cartoonists or but people just making comics as an art the way that I do, every story being different, thing to thing, weird formats. It didn't exist. So there was no way that I would think of having a career. I went to art school for illustration, so there was that aspect. And I kind of chased after the dying embers of print illustration stuff.
Right. I went to school for illustration. I'm kind of curious what you learned, because the thing I say I learned. Yeah, I mean.
From school, no, because I don't know if the teachers, I guess it depends on where you go, what you do or anything, but no, the teachers were
really
struggling
nothing?
Illustrators too, and they were telling me about a bunch of stuff that just in 5 years you weren't going to have to do.
You mean
getting slides made of your shit and printing them out and calling somebody on the phone to make an appointment in their office to show them your portfolio. Right. It was really not going to be happening 5 years later. So I was learning that kind of stuff in school, but they just didn't want me to draw the way that I did or make the kind of art that I made. It made no sense to them. There was nothing to point to of anything in alternative cartoonists being a success, because it was Charles Burns was going to happen a few years later, with somebody that was on billboards or something, but there was nothing. So they just discouraged me from doing what I was doing. And I started making mini comics and then sending the mail to people all over the planet. I was 19 years old in art school, and they're like, "Don't do that." I was like, "Nah." They're like, and then I watched fine artists and my friends struggle to get gallery shows. I was like, I don't care. I'm sending 5 copies to some weird address in Japan. They sent me, I don't know where they got, there's some guy in Germany got American dollars and put them in an envelope. So I was just kind of.
How did they knew you existed?
Things like Fact Sheet 5.
I don't know what that is.
Fact Sheet 5 was it was a news. Do you know what Maximum Rock and Roll is?
No.
Maximum Rock and Roll, it still exists. It's this newspaper magazine about hardcore. But if you wanted to know about hardcore, know where a club was, or anything that was happening in underground punk rock music throughout the 80s and the 90s, you would open up Maximum Rock and Roll and there would be addresses and resources. So Fact Sheet 5 was like that for print media in zines. I believe it was around from the 80s through the 90s, I don't know if Fact Sheet 5 exists in some digital form. So I was in that, but then also just people made zines and comic books would put here's some stuff I like, here's people's addresses in the back and that kind of stuff. And it happened really quickly. And I didn't even know where the European and the foreign zine people, because it was already this established thing. So I don't even know sometimes where they found me and stuff. But yeah, there was a very print underground thing going on. So it was that kind of stuff. And then even John, but then one of those things was also, there's a thing called Wow Cool that was like that was just for comics. And that's how I found John Porcellino. And then John was doing Spit and a Half just like he is now in the, very early 90s. So it was a combo of all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. So it's all pre-internet.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear
the pre-internet zine scene. It was quite a thing.
I'm sure it was very different in some ways.
It was full of a lot of information. Information was the most important part of underground media, as opposed to art, where it's almost the complete opposite now, at least with like what I see in zines and risograph and the art book fairs and what is called zines. Most of the thing, like a comic book, an art thing that's risographed and stapled together, like wouldn't be called a zine from like the nomenclature that I was used to when I was younger. A zine was something, was like, you don't want to learn how to clean guns? Or you want to learn about like natural farming or like just like weird things you would find on the internet? There were zines and you could write to people, newsletters, that kind of stuff. But,
by information, you just mean literal knowledge.
Yeah, literal information. Yeah. You know, even though most of it was like record reviews and shit like that, you know, interviews with people.
Right. So there was like a magazines. Kind of intimacy and density to them.
Yeah, in a certain underground nature of like you know, an obscure interest or something like that, you know.
And so did that transition easily for you to say, I don't know, what was the first social media platform you were using for your work? Were you on Tumblr, Flickr, these kind of things?
Yeah, I guess I was on Friendster and MySpace too.
Wow. Okay, so you took to it. You weren't stubbornly being a Luddite about it.
No. And that was just how you would like talk to your friends. But they, you know, they just seem, I guess what they seem like now, just kind of like weird novelties or something.
Right.
Except now they like control our whole lives or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of different.
I didn't admit MySpace was just seemed like a silly game, you know? So
yeah, of course. No, I mean, for me going to school for illustration, at least what I was taught was a very rigorous process that I did not see going on in, say, like the painting department. So just like iterative drawing and then thumbnails. And as I got older, I kind of appreciated that. But from the perspective of like facilities, going to school for illustration makes no sense. There's nothing there. You know, at least printmaking, there's these giant old devices you'll never have in your home. But
no, I was very pissed when I was done that I was like, why wasn't I a printmaking major?
What's
wrong with me?
You would make complete sense. I mean, I feel like if you have
oh my God, yeah, it's this whole universe of like making, you know, weird art books and stuff like that, you know.
Do you feel that you at least learned process, or that was not even occurring in your education?
Oh, my like illustration education. It was a really long time ago, and it's hard to remember. I mean, I remember all the base. I don't know. I just feel like it was maybe it was where I went to school there, but there was nothing like, there's no storyboarding or like any stuff like that. It was really just like, here's how to make commercial illustrations. You should paint like NC Wyeth, but be able to do it, but be able to do it overnight.
Yep.
Or something like that. But
that's a good point. Yeah. I went to school, and my school was in Philly, and thus like the Brandywine River School those were like the gods, and they should be. I mean, those people were incredible. Yeah. But yeah, that I never thought of it from like trying to execute that, but on a very tight budget.
Yeah.
Or not.
But there were no computers. But there were no computers yet. And it was like halfway through my illustration education, like Photoshop 1 came out. And we used it and stuff like that, but there wasn't anything you're going to be doing with it yet, you know? It was really just like right before everything changed.
Yeah, that's a really interesting time.
I like to remember it had no layers and one undo.
Wow. It's almost like a real, it's like really drawing.
The resolution was, but everything looked like blocks.
Like paint.
Everything looked like Mario Brothers, a little bit better detail, but it was really... And I don't remember how it wasn't like you could scan. I guess there were scanners, but I don't really even remember that. But yeah, it was very interesting. You could change colors. You could put colors inside things, change the different colors. You could draw something in yellow, make it green with the computer. Yeah.
Do you use the computer at all with your work?
Yeah, I do very basic, you know, like window pane Photoshop stuff. And I realized recently there's probably faster ways of doing it but I just want to do it the way that I've been doing it forever, you know?
Right. Yeah, just personally, my Photoshop process is like I'm preparing for a screen print or something. There's really not a lot of complexity.
The same. I was one of the last photostat camera operators. I shut it down.
What's that? Did you say photostat?
Yeah.
No, what's that?
Wait, you went to illustration school? They didn't tell you what a photostat was?
No. Yeah, look this
up.
A
photostat is a giant camera. It's kind of as big as a room, but it was how you would take a high contrast photo of something that was perfect. It was what was used to make every single photograph that was in every newspaper and every book before there were computers. Mm-hmm. It's where DPI, the thing that I think about computers and how they're like stupid and they're just like, it's garbage. Like everything is still really bad is the DPI. I had 2 DPI on the photostat camera. High resolution was 24, regular resolution was 12. They invent the computer. They're like, let's make it 300. You're like, that sucks. You can't do anything with 300. They're like, no, we're going to change the entire world. Everything that I looked at that's printed now, it looks like garbage. You have to go back to before 1980 or before to see anything printed that doesn't look like shit because it's like 300 DPI. But they didn't, because their computer wasn't fast enough. They couldn't do it. You couldn't save a file that was bigger than 10 megabytes. But then the entire world changed to 300 DPI. It's very weird. But a stat camera was just how you made, high resolution black and white photos. And it had a literal screen. Like I would pull the screen in front of the camera. But
I was not.
But that's basically how I use when you say preparing for, silkscreen. That's you would get photostats made to do that kind of stuff. But yeah, I scan all my art, I make it bitmap, 1200 DPI, and then I do the coloring in Photoshop and behind it and everything like that.
Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's just
stat cameras were really cool and interesting, and I have such beautiful reproductions of my early work that's so perfect. You could take something that's a really large sheet of paper and make it 2 by 3 inches, and it would look absolutely perfect in black and white, It was how everything was made. Everything that you see that's printed, there's little ads of album covers or things in a magazine or something. Somebody went and got a photostat made that was that small, 1-to-1 size to paste up to print in the magazine. Yeah, it's talking shit like this that I think that I could be a teacher probably.
Oh, I'm sure you could be a teacher.
But I'm I can ramble on about.
I also feel there's a threshold where you get good. If you're good enough, you can be at least a middling teacher.
Yeah.
If you yourself are good enough.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I've had some bad teachers. I've had some good ones who were probably exceptionally oriented towards that process.
Right.
Of giving information.
Yeah.
Also, but I do feel that you have a very idiosyncratic style. So sometimes a teacher can be so off on their own island and world, they might not even be able to impart much back to the student,
I definitely had teachers like that where it's you're an amazing artist. And it's I just, but I don't know if you can teach this class, I remember that.
Do you feel you understand comics from that perspective, that you could impart its fundamentals back to a student?
Well, it depends. In my kind of comics as art way of viewing them, I don't know if I'm not the best to teach someone a commercial way of doing things because I'm not as in touch with it, I don't know how you draw on the computer and make a pitch to make a graphic novel about Harriet Tubman or somebody for Scholastic, that. There's all this kind of stuff that can be taught now with comics.
That's true.
But no, I can talk what I think about them and stuff like that.
Well, what do you think about them? What do you seek to achieve via your personal comics?
I
know that's a tough question.
I know, right?
It's kind of too literal. But I think you made enough work where there is a thread, there is a certain tone.
Yeah. I guess I'm really in the most raw sense, being an artist about comics. And just kind of doing it in my own weird made up way, the way that you would make a film that's uniquely yours or a painting or something like that, trying to just do it in my own voice, I guess. is how I'm trying to do it. And now I see a lot of it as just being like transcribed. Like I just get very raw ideas delivered to me that I'm just kind of like trying to put down on paper, you know?
Mm.
But I see comics as it's just sequential drawings are very kind of like, and then drawing is such a big part of comics to me. And I think as being this kind of like basis of all the other arts, you know, so many visual arts start with drawing, but kind of like drawing unto itself as an art form or something, you know, comics are very much like that. But I kind of think very much like everything is comic, like letters are comics, like the letter B is like Donald Duck is a cartoon character, you know, and like putting them all together making different words is a sequential like kind of thing. And sort of the history of how letters came to be seem sequential in comics and early languages and stuff, you know. So it seems like something they've always existed in one form, you know, like nobody can really pinpoint them exactly, which is what makes them so kind of like different, you know?
Yeah, I think
and it seems like they started in the early 20th century or a little bit before that or with printing or something like that. But like, man, like everybody understands what a comic is and knows how to read one. Whereas like language, you have to work, you have to go to school and it's, you know, no one is comics illiterate, you know, it's very interesting. So those are the kinds of ideas I have.
Yeah. So you're stripping.
As far as like what I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to do kind of like what each idea I have that comes to me and just kind of like, you know, transcribe it or whatever.
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean in the sense that there is, you know, there's comic-y comics, but then there is just the fundamental nature of what makes a comic function that you can play with. And that applied to art is technically limitless, I would assume. I don't know why a comic would need to look a particular way.
Right, yeah.
Based on those dynamics.
Mm-hmm. And I very much like I view each comic as being different. So I just have like visions of ideas for comics, you know? And I can see like, I'm like, I want to make this book. It's this size and it's green. And this is what the story is about. Like, you know, it's kind of like, I'm trying to I get a vision of an object like any other artist would, you know?
And do you then script out or do you just let it flow page by page?
Oh no, I usually always do scripts.
Really?
Yeah. Far in advance.
So there's a precision to what you're trying to get down from the vision.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because I'll get the basic idea of it, and that's why I have to write it down. I'll often just make blank grid panels and write the words in it of what the picture would be. You know, a tree. She turns to the left, goes over here, just so I like envision what the page will be, and then later, I'm just trying to like transcribe like the idea that I see.
And do you have any sense of where those ideas come from? Like in the spiritual sense? Or do they just simply arrive and you have no concern about who they were sent by?
I know. I think they're sent by another version of myself that's in some other spiritual realm. That's kind of how I think about it, as opposed to like an angel or an entity sort of delivering something to you, which is what a lot of sort of like classically those experiences are, you know, alien visitation, people who get, you know, Jesus told me, that kind of stuff. I almost see it as another version of myself. Like I'm the one who's out there kind of thing. I don't know if that's shaped by modern science fiction or something like that, you know, but
so like a higher
that's kind of what I see it as.
Almost like a higher version of you transmitting these ideas that allow you to pull up to it, like a rope or something?
Yeah. The last book I did, Halcyon, was just fully delivered to me that way. It was kind of slowly started in my head, and then I couldn't pay attention to other things. And I was like, wanted to be working on something else. And I just got this idea of what it would look like and everything like that. And I kind of just like had to do it. But it was very much like, it was just like the voice inside my head telling me to do it, which is pretty, you know, normal kind of thing. But because of the art and the way that it is, I feel like it's very just like delivered.
Yeah, I've never heard it put that way. Just like receiving it from yourself, but at a higher plane is a very strange idea. In a good way.
Yeah.
There's something...
but not if you're into the multiverse.
I don't know. I'm not into the multiverse. I'm into the universe. Yeah, I'm into one.
I enjoy this really weirdly spiritual idea coming into like all this media. It's very weird. It's funny.
Which idea? The multiverse?
The multiverses and all the movies and stuff like that. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I feel like everything is so fractious that more and more I'm interested in unis and unities and ways to like kind of re-glue shit back together. So I don't want to hear about fucking parallel universes bumping into each other and some quantum, you know what I mean?
The Matrix, all that stuff. Yeah.
The Matrix. You like that movie?
I don't know if I like it. I don't dislike it.
Fair enough. Okay, I think I understand. I feel similar about this film.
Well, it's stuff in pop culture, big movies, like things like that. I don't know if like is really always like the word for it, you know, because I'm very entertained. I love to watch all those Marvel movies. Do I like them? I don't know.
Oh, you do? It's fascinating.
I love to watch them all. You know, way more than I like to read Marvel comic books or anything like that. But the thing about all of them in the Star Wars too is just like, oh, I was a nerd way back then, and you've like specifically made it so that somebody my age will be like, oh yeah, She-Hulk.
Right.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I like those things, and I don't want to talk about the shows with people, and I don't want to like read on the internet about them, but it's just like, that's what I want to watch when I want to like zone out and watch TV.
Huh.
So that, yeah.
Is it
but I kind of like The Matrix. Sure. I like the premise behind it. I think it's super interesting.
Yeah. I think it's proving to be, I don't know. I guess it's been a while since I watched it. It's pretty ham-fisted, I guess.
It is very, and I recently tried to watch all of them because there's a bunch.
No, they're horrible films.
Oh my God, yeah. And then they get more and more ham-fisted, but also in their like weird style of whatever year that is or something. It's all very like, I don't know.
They become
indicative
more
of when they were, so indicative of when they're made. So it's, like they, you know. Yeah,
they just become unashamed of their kitsch.
Yes.
Nature that you didn't even know existed in the first one because there was no context. But
exactly, and it's very serious. Yeah. As
the Wachowskis made more films, you realized, oh, they're very into kitsch and kind of goofy.
Yeah, which I like.
Oh, they've made some great films.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, as you step back from all this work you've made, obviously you're channeling these things essentially one at a time. But if you have to explain to some random relative,
right?
You know, this is always difficult with strange art comics, but what it is you make these books about, quote unquote, have you come to a concise explanation? I mean, there's definitely a kind of I don't know if spiritual is the word you would apply to the work, but there is that sense of I don't know. What I like about the work is it's not heavy, but it's obvious for me. It's obviously dealing with matters that could be, or matters that are metaphysical and far more serious than kind of just like everyday interaction.
Well, it's interesting because it's I do like the fact that if I like meet someone at a party, or if I'm just like talking to somebody over a beer or something, I can say graphic novel now and have them have probably some idea as to what I do. Which is interesting because that wasn't always the case. So I like that in the last, decade or more. But then when I say that, I'm just like, I'm an art cartoonist, which means like I make books, but the books are like paintings or a weird art film. It's like, do you like weird art movies that don't make sense? I make books like that. That's usually what I would say,
Weird art movies that don't make sense. Yeah,
I know, because like most people who watch cinema now have an idea about kind of like art films and things, and I may not like them,
Of course.
Or may like them or whatever, or would understand what they are, And I usually just say that I make it, if I was I'd make stuff along those lines. It's usually how I would describe it. And then, if the person knows something more about comics or knows who Robert Crumb is or something like that, I might say, something more about it. And I might say that it's, a lot of the stuff is I usually say it's philosophical or spiritual or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's there. I think that anyone who could read would kind of understand. just the use of the words. Certain words are kind of touched upon, but is there a clear, like I'm sure you're interested in that exploration, right, in your everyday life, and then these comics are the expression of that. But is there, have you come around to a specific thing that you feel you're trying to wrestle with? I mean, I don't know if it's like new age, quote unquote, but is that a thing that it might get labeled with? And is that accurate? And does that mean anything to you?
Oh, what, that term with the word?
Yeah.
Well, the cartoon Utopia, certainly, that book's like it's a new age, or occult textbook or something like that. So I would say that it's a fine word to use. It's like there's a lot, like witchcraft and the occult and things have their own sort of like modern popularity. New age is a little of an older term or something, but it's probably more literally what I'm doing, because so much of my work is, or at least that book, I'm drawing off stuff from the New Thought movement and the sort of like metaphysical movements of the, late 1800s, early 1900s, which became what you would call New Age. So, yeah.
And when was that always with you when you were younger? Or how did you stumble? You moved to LA and then
I moved to LA.
Found that language?
I moved to LA and noticed people were more into those sorts of things. And I'm like, okay, let me look at tarot cards and astrology and just like this stuff that is more like prevalent in this, especially in the sort of like arts and music community, particular to this city. And then I just fell in love with so much of it and different aspects of it. I really like the older stuff. I like alchemy and the occult and all that stuff. And only more recently have kind of seen how it very much relates to kind of comics or underground media and stuff like that. Alchemy it was secret and they wrote in code and stuff like that. And I found so many weird spiritual books that are just weird art books, that are just like made at a certain time and written in weird flowery writing. And I got fascinated by kind of all that stuff and was kind of trying to integrate some of it into my personal life and, kind of just looking at all different things that were out there.
Right. Were you raised with this kind of?
No, I went to Catholic school.
Me too. Yeah.
So I was raised Catholic, and to be honest, alchemy and the occult. I'm really into Gnosticism now, and it's this kind of thing of finding something in the back part of whatever, Catholicism that's so weird that I can appreciate, take into my life, understand the parts. I feel like Catholicism informed me with a lot of my artistic things and stuff like that. There's so many paintings and pictures and sculptures and stuff that you see from the religion, and I went to Europe and I've been in Basilica, when you're in a giant cathedral and the way it makes you feel, I'm like, look at this art, so I had like the opposite of that. And, 70s, 80s, New England, I didn't even know what a hippie was. I came into stuff, I didn't read underground comics till I was like into my 20s. I didn't have any exposure to it. I didn't have any older like heavy metal cousins or anything, like that kind of stuff. Or like, or like kids in the neighborhood or the older brothers that's usually how you would find out like hippie stuff. I didn't know anything about any of it until I was older, which I think made me more interested in it or open to a lot of it because I just really hadn't thought about it. I didn't, as a lot of Californian people grow up with that stuff, aren't as interested in it, if their parents were, but.
Yes, that often happens. I have a friend who was raised Zen Buddhist, and he'd have to go to Zen camp at like 13, and he hated it. And I always thought that was funny to me, just because
if you went to like Catholic camp or something like that. More like I wouldn't go.
Exactly.
School was enough. I had nuns for school teachers, and I actually think it was very interesting in the long run. And they encouraged my artistic interests, I think, because I think they were artistic women. Most of them had like Master of English degrees and stuff like that. It's like what they did with their time, which I, later I think was kind of beneficial.
Oh, I'm incredibly grateful for being raised within that symbol structure and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Catholicism clearly has a kind of poetic nature that I feel a lot of Reformation stuff doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
They're very stripped down, but Catholicism is full of. I just got a book on gargoyles and grotesques in medieval churches,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just shocking what's going on. They clearly have this holistic comprehension of the whole world in a sense, and although those things exist in some way in the world, they're put on the outside of the church. They're not put on the inside. So there's this kind of understanding of the hierarchy of placement. But what's interesting to me is looking at those buildings now. I can imagine all the different artists I know having a place.
I know, right?
And that's so beautiful to me. People who make beautiful work, people who make human work, delicate work, and then people who make absolutely grotesque, symbolic work could find their way into that system and that structure, which I find I never even realized that going to Catholic school when I was younger.
Right, sure. I've often thought of that, of the different, because having this artistic life where I'm very much indulged to do whatever I want, and I make art comics, and I have publishers that will put out whatever what I make and let me do it myself, and don't edit me. I'm it compared to what it would have been like. It was just like, man, you got to sculpt these lions, and it's got to look just like this. It's got to look like this dude. You're going to study with him for 20 years, and then that's what you're going to do. And that sort of craft, sort of thing in all different aspects. I think I would really like that.
You think you would like it?
I think I would, being a craftsman or having that. I went to, with the band I was in, I went to China once. And when I was there, there's just so much state art, and there's so many dragon things, and there's just giant statues on the highway. There's a thing that's like a cement erosion barrier on a highway. It has beautiful golden horses with flags across it. All of them do. You're in the middle of nowhere. And I was with the piano player friend. He plays classical music and jazz. He can play anything. He was like, I could walk right in here and defect and then apply to the musicians union, and they would give me a job playing a piano wherever the piano needed to be played. I would really like that. And I was looking at all the art, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. If they just told me to make these cool things on the side of the highway, I think I would like to do that. It was very interesting.
It's hard to imagine because we all have our own little culture now we try to express where, I guess as you're a musician as well, you surely understand the larger kind of project that involves multiple people. Yeah. But oftentimes with comics especially, it's just you're kind of on an island channeling what you can. And so
especially now too. It didn't even used to be that way with comics, What
do you mean?
But we've made it that way, in the modern context.
Do you mean just the
Marvel comics and mainstream comics having 6 guys doing it and stuff like that? Or even daily cartoonists having ghostwriters that would just draw their character for years and that, those sort of things. It doesn't
Yeah.
I often wonder what it would be like if there was, if there were alternative comics where 4 people that make other books worked on it. No one's tried it. I haven't been invited yet to pencil something that someone else inks and another person colors, but it would be very funny to do.
I feel like someone had a project like that, but I'm blanking on it. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. But I think that is part of the appeal of independent comics is the total control one has.
Yeah.
Without that, I think it's easy to romanticize and fantasize about being part of some kind of somewhat monoculture that's just trying to build devotional work and, going through a studio structure. I mean, that sounds cool in theory to me as well.
Yeah. But I'm sure it would feel like drudgery as a life, or whatever. But I don't know.
Probably, I think it's really hard for us to imagine.
Yeah. But I did work in a Xerox shop for a long time, and I love folding pieces of paper. And in the 20 years since I worked at the Xerox shop, I fold pieces of paper and I do the stapler and I actually like all that production stuff.
That was your studio. Yeah, that was your studio.
Yeah, that was my studio for making things, and a lot of it was I would be doing it for work, the same thing, that I was doing for myself. But
so if you didn't encounter well, some of these more underground comics still 25. Were you drawing before that? Just in a...
Yeah, and I knew modern comics. I was like, like I knew punk stuff, and I knew like Chester Brown, and Judge Dredd, or like there were things that I knew, but it was just like the comic shop I went to just didn't have any of that stuff from the 60s, And there was a point with comics where I was becoming more of an artist and liking weird art stuff, and was into art films and stuff that I was like, I don't know, I read comics that got a gun in it, and it's all these, I'm not into this. These weird adventures. Is there anything else? I thought I was going to not be interested in them anymore. But then, so I was aware of Love and Rockets and all of that kind of stuff before I knew about earlier things. But it was like the same with my music taste. I knew who the Doors were and popular bands, but I didn't know about, like music from the 60s. But I was into the Butthole Surfers and all this, the moderns. Just coincidentally,
Okay, so you were cool. You were just peeling back the layers of cool.
It wasn't cool to be interested in any of those things. No, people would chase you down the street. If you listen to punk rock, I don't know. It was weird being presented as cool.
No.
It's later.
Did music or art come first in respect to, like, as a child, what were you kind of focused on?
Oh, probably the art stuff, I guess. Being a drummer, it's like I'm barely a musician, but yeah, I do kind of like decided to do the stuff that like when you're 4 years old, I'm still like trying to perfect it or something,
Yeah.
I guess I always used to like bang on pots and pans and didn't, when they put the things in front of me as a kid and I hit them and then made the scribbles. Yeah, it's kind of funny that way.
Wait, some people go so far away from that they can't even see it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Actually, I ask people that all the time when I meet, like if they're an accountant. Like, how do you know you want to be an accountant when you were a child? Well, it's kind of not how it works, but
yeah,
sometimes it is actually.
I know.
Strangely enough.
Yeah.
Like people are just really into that specific thing. So were you like focused on, like, let's say you're going
as soon as I saw a comic, I was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I read Peanuts. I was like, I want to do this.
That's
and then
bizarre.
Noticed there were other comics with stories, and I was like, I want to do that. And then the very first time I saw Spider-Man, I was like, that's it. I'm making comic books. I want to do this. Which is funny because Spider-Man was such a sort of like different comic with the teenager. It changed it up and everything like that. I was kind of like hit with that stuff right away. But I'm also like Sesame Street came out the year I was born. And I'm very much, I did like cartoons. I was like my whole like discipline as a child had to do with like when Bugs Bunny was on.
Of course.
And stuff like that. But yeah, no, I was interested in all of it like right away and knew that I wanted to do it. Yeah, at a very, very early age.
Something about...
And then tried to talk myself out of it by doing other things and like trying other arts. And it was funny, like going to school for illustration or doing things. But I just knew that I wanted to make comics the whole time.
Yeah, something about Spider-Man and Sesame Street sums up your style.
Good. I was only noticing recently
the webbiness. There's like webbiness.
The faces of all my characters are just Muppets.
Yeah,
everybody I draw, they're like Ernie. Like they all look like Ernie or something. And it's just recently that I'm like, oh, that's totally what I do. They're just Muppet heads.
Yeah, there's. Well, which Spider-Man are we talking about? Who was the
first Spider-Man I got there was Scholastic had these little things you could like buy books in school. You would check out a little checklist and they would give you stuff, and there were some comic books in it. So I had a paperback book, like a Fawcett or Dell paperback with like the first 5 issues of Spider-Man in it and something like that. And they had Peanuts ones. I have a Wonder Woman one that's crazy because it's really old Wonder Woman comics from the 40s. And it makes no sense why they would be printing that.
Yeah.
And it was just exactly the year that the TV show came out that I bought it. And I actually think that had a huge like effect on all my stuff because there's a lot of like weird metaphysical stuff on those early Wonder Woman comics. But it's very weird. They have like the original ones drawn by H.G. Peter in a little book. But yeah, that's how I first saw them. But the Spider-Man one, I was like, yep, this. That's what I want to do.
Well, that's
And
gotta
I
be,
think that I read as a child, I think I was in like elementary school, and I read some article about like how Steve Ditko didn't draw it anymore or something. And, like they have other people draw Spider-Man. I was like, so maybe I could draw Spider-Man? It's funny sort of thing. That's like an elementary school kid.
I'd love to see that.
It was actually the first thing that I ever had published was a Spider-Man comic.
Really?
Yeah, it was the first thing. It was the first thing that was offset printed in a book with the spine, I guess is the easiest way to say it. That was when because I'd been in zines and stuff like that, but it was the first like published thing. Yeah, my publisher, Highwater Books, Marvel went bankrupt in the 90s. Can't remember when this would have, mid 90s, Marvel was bankrupt. It was in bankruptcy. So it was a tongue-in-cheek issue, benefit issue for Marvel, is what it said on the cover. So,
that's funny.
And it was given away for free. It was Highwater Books. Tom Devlin did it. It has a Seth did. It's not just the X-Men. It's a Submariner. It's like a bunch of Marvel characters by Seth on the cover. But yeah, I did this I did the comic where Spider-Man meets the Human Torch, and they have this sort of like high school class struggle thing happen with the cool kids and the rich kids, and Peter Parker goes to like the rich kid's house and everything, and then they chase Spider-Man away. They think he's bad. But I did, I did. That was the first comic I did.
Nice.
Or not the first one I had published.
And where does the music fit into all of this?
I don't know exactly. I was always kind of interested in making like weird noise experimental stuff. And then I don't know, I just gravitated towards the drums, and it was like a social thing. If I like with friends in high school and then friends in art school and stuff like that, I was always very kind of casual and hobbyist kind of thing with me. But then I ended up, when I moved to LA, being in this band Lavender Diamond, and we were a real band, and we were on Matador Records, and we went on tour. And so I experienced all of that, the world of the music industry and stuff like that. But being a drummer was always just kind of a hobbyist kind of thing with me. And I definitely have to say the music environment that I came of age in the 90s was very casual. You didn't have to give your band a name because you weren't going to do anything. Your band might play at a party. You didn't need to really think about it if you didn't want to. And then the idea of like experimental music and stuff like that, you just fucking around kind of stuff, and like maybe you'd make a tape or a 7-inch or something like that, but maybe you wouldn't, or, who knows? Environment.
I could be wrong, but I feel that spirit is either lost or diminished at the moment. This kind of frivolity that isn't leading or being parlayed into some career or
even just visibility, visibility with the stuff. But it's across everything in our culture right now with the picture phone in your face kind of stuff. But yeah, I do notice that. I try and not be like an old guy and like mad about it or anything like that. I just see that that's different kinds of creativity can come through it. But I do like to kind of like remind younger people, like if they're getting too caught up on some of it, that like you don't have to do that part. You can just fuck around if you want to, I see things on the other end of it where I see, because they have like everything in the world, where the younger musicians just playing crazy stuff, being influenced by crazy things they would have never known about, and then just having weird results come from that, or being very proficient at playing or recording in very specific styles and doing creative stuff like that is kind of the opposite of it. But yeah, I definitely know what you mean.
Do you feel at this stage in your development you can still fuck around like that, like in this kind of completely innocent way?
Yeah, I made a career of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I can see. That's the impressive
well, I'm doing the
part.
Subscription thing now, and I have to make a comic like all the time right away, and I don't have time to think about it. It's kind of a fun thing that I've put on myself, it's definitely something that I see in all this freedom of cartooning. Like, I do like to think about the constraints and the assignments of cartoonists in the 20th century, and like what you had to do, and the, you know, the gruel of it, and being under like deadline and stuff like that is interesting, because we don't have so much of it. Usually a publisher will take your book when it's ready, you know?
Right.
But it's fun having this. I have to do stuff really quickly lately. So yeah, it's just kind of like a lot of experimentation.
And did this style, like you have a very clear style, someone knows immediately it's your work. When did that begin to congeal? Like, is there any sense, if I looked at your drawings from 25, would it be obvious?
You know, I don't know. You'd have to tell me from looking at all my books, like, you know, because like that Skibber Be Bye book that I did it's 20, you know, it's like 25 years old. And like, does that look like all my other work? I think so.
Yeah.
Like what? Yeah. I don't know exactly when it coalesced. Probably when I started making the comics and Xeroxing them, I think is when it just like, this is the way that I'm going to draw comics if they're going to be printed. And it does look just the way that it looks. Before that, I had a little more scrappier style. It was a little more splattery or something. I used to try and draw faces a little bit more realistic or something, kind of a style, but then I just coalesced on the sort of like cartooniness. But the main thing with the way that I draw is the sort of clear line style without any like shading or anything, was just for the fact that I was making Xeroxes. And often to make a Xerox, you have to make you're making a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox to make the paste up kind of thing. So in regular Xerox machines didn't make any gray for you unless you had a photostat camera so that you could make a little dot screen to then make on the photocopy, you know. But that's why I did it that way. And it was also a sort of like an illustration style. I kind of drew in that way because like the New York Times, like when they did have illustrations, they were usually just lines without any gradation in them. You know,
right.
And I did end up being, I had a lot of art on the op-ed page in the late 90s, early 2000s, because of the way that it looked that way. So I did kind of develop that clear line art style as it's kind of like a illustration style that was kind of like people would need for a lot of things. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It's always interesting to hear about very simple non-art technical limitations that can reverberate through a lifetime effectively. But I think
it's funny that it did, that I didn't. I was like, oh, I could be painter. I actually do want to make a painted graphic novel. I had a very nice gouache painting style when I was younger, and I fully gave it up to color everything on the computer because it was quicker and kind of the only way to do it, you know. But I want to kind of like make a painted book, but at the moment I don't know exactly how. It would just take a very long time. I'm not sure I would fit it into my life or, you know, finance spending all the time doing it, but I'm thinking about it.
Right. And is your life is it mostly drawing? Like is a day mostly consisting of drawing?
Yeah, I kind of like go in and out of, depends on what, you know, where I am in the, you know, in a project or what I'm working on. But yeah, for the most part, I always have some drawing I need to get done.
Yeah. I didn't realize Skibber Be Bye was that old.
Yeah, I drew it in the 90s. It came out in 2000, but I drew it between 95 and 99.
Wow.
And had the cool idea of not serializing it before it was a full book. It was kind of me.
Was that a big deal?
I hadn't really seen anyone do that before. It's weird to talk about, like weird, because it seems like graphic novels have this history where they slowly came into being, but there was a very like set time where they did exist and they didn't exist, you know. And graphic novels that I knew that existed were 8 issues of 8 Ball put into a book. Those existed for a decade. But like a cartoonist you never heard of making a 250-page book, I had never heard of anyone doing that. And it was kind of Tom Devlin. He's with Drawn and Quarterly, has been for a long time. But before that, his publisher is High Water Books. And he had a very set idea for High Water Books, which is this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to present, like underground cartoonists. Maybe they've done a few things, but people mostly didn't know about them. And to make really well-designed books that were all one story of a comic. And, a million other people are having that idea kind of around the same time, around the year 2000. And it just, they all started happening. But it was very interesting. I really liked it. It was fun having a friend who wanted to start being a publisher and had all these cool creative ideas. It was really fun to do that.
And so you have a big project you're working on now, or is that? I know I was getting those Cartoon Utopia 2, but that's done, right?
Yeah.
Or is it called the new
Yeah, and that ended up being the book Halcyon.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I called it the new Cartoon Utopia for the Xerox versions, and then when I made it into a graphic novel, I called it Halcyon.
Oh, so those are Xerox'd.
Yeah, or they're not Xerox's. They're laser printed, I guess you would say.
Sure,
but I still call it a Xerox machine.
Nice.
Or call them photocopies, even though they're not photocopies. Analog xerography was something that no one really cared when it went away.
Yeah.
It's similar to like broadcast television or something like that. It was like no one seemed to like make a big fuss when it wasn't around anymore.
I think I understand why.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
Wasn't needed anymore. Well, the Xerox machines were these giant hulking pieces of equipment, and you needed technicians to keep them going for you. So it's not, if you've got one if you find one in a basement somewhere, it probably isn't going to work.
Right. So you have Halcyon, which came out, that was
2022, 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I have a new book, Shell Collection, which is the first 75 issues, stuff from the first 75 issues of the monthly subscription that I do, made into a book. And colored. I did, all the other things were Xeroxes, so I took pages and, made them full color comics and stuff like that. It's a book that I did basically because I could do it. It was just like, I can put these, I don't have to put these all together into a book, but I can. So I think I will. And I think it's an interesting sort of collection for that reason.
And so are many of these books made by this kind of, like, I don't know if it's fair to say that you use you get through these little increments at a time and then you collect them up, as opposed to Skipper Bevi. But is that a process that you kind of, is that how you build most of your books? Like kind of just chipping away at them?
Yeah. I guess it depends because so many of the books are different, but a lot of the books I've done, like Cartoon Utopia, I had made all the material that's in there. I'd printed as a zine or a poster, or kind of did it in increments along the way, and then kind of like put it all together, kind of stuff.
No, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's how Shell Collection was put together as well, right?
Yeah, it's all very random, unrelated things, often that were mini comics. So I've rearranged them to be on pages and stuff like that. So it's just, none of the material has anything to do with anything else. It's just all a kind of collection of things. And I could have done a book like Halcyon, like a graphic novel, not shown it to anyone, done it all at once. But it's just kind of the finances. And because I had the subscription, I was like, I'd love to give people a continuing story and be like, what, when you read my comics, you're not often like, I wonder what happens next in the Ron Regé story. It's not usually what I give people. So I really wanted to try and do it that way so that it came out in increments. But I could have just as easily just like waited 2 years. I drew most of it during the pandemic. That's how I kind of got it done so quickly. Is like I had a year to just stay in my house and just work on it,
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So that book did come out this year, right? Shell Collection?
Yeah. 2 months ago. Came out.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
And I assume you're just going to keep going.
Yeah, I think so. It is funny. Before you told me, no prep, it'll be easy just to do this interview. But just 5 minutes before you called, I just like grabbed my shelf of books. I was like, it's good to have them in front of me in case I want to talk about something on a certain page. And I threw them all down, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, look at all this shit.
How many books? How many books you got there?
I got so many. I got to keep doing them. I like to say that I am going to quit at some point as a kind of a funny thing.
As a joke?
I don't know if it's a joke necessarily. I do have... The thing about all these books is I usually know like more than a decade in advance that I'm going to make them. Halcyon was weird because it just came out of nowhere and forced me to do it. But usually I just know what I want to do. And I have like 2 more projects I want to do. And I don't really know what comes after that, which is silly because usually once I get through doing it, I have other ideas of things. But I said I want to quit so that I have other time in my life to pursue other forms of art. Like be a sculptor or a painter or something like that. And so I'd like to think that maybe as like in my later years, I could stop doing comics and switch over to doing some other sort of medium, because I'm someone who has ideas for kind of like everything, and I could have like, I could have like 5 lifetimes and talk about the multiverse or whatever, like I have a whole painting career in mind, a whole like sculpture, idea in mind, or like, things that I would love to pursue,
So you think you'll be laying on your deathbed and...
Yeah, with a pen on the... I hope so.
Yeah, and you'll like say, I wish I was...
I'll try other people. It also, when I look at all my books, I also feel like I haven't done anything yet. I haven't gotten it right yet, and I haven't started yet. And maybe you should not look at what I've done, and you should look at this new thing that I'm doing. I've always felt like that. And I throw all these books out, and I'm like, Jesus, look at all that shit, but it's not right. The books come out right. I'm often very happy with the result of the book and the paper that it's on and the cover. It's not like I'm disappointed, but just in general, I'm like, that's not how I meant to say it exactly, and a lot of artists make the same painting and the same film and the same book over and over or whatever. But yeah, I haven't gotten it right yet. So I would think that on the deathbed, I'd be like, no, it's too green. I should have made it more yellow over the corner. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, no.
I'll be back. My ghost will come back and finish the paintings.
I mean, it sounds like you might be doing that already.
Yeah, I know. Oh, right? You got it. You figured it out for me.
That's it. We're done.
That's what it is. Yeah, I think it is. Well, I do. I'm very much, I've kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, be like, where did I get new spiritual ideas, or like being raised Catholic or being young? I've had sort of like experiences of deja vu and ideas that I have lived before and will live again my entire life. And at this point in my life, I don't feel like pretending anymore. I don't know why everyone doesn't feel this way. I know I've lived 1,000 times before, and I'll be back soon enough and live again. And I don't know what makes me feel this way, but this is just a fact that I've always been aware of. And it's been a slow process over the life, and I don't feel like I can kind of like pretend that isn't true anymore.
Are you assuming everyone's lived that long? Because I think that could be true for you, but I'm definitely
that everyone's lives repeat.
No. I mean, you've never met someone who felt kind of fresh.
Oh yes, I have.
To the scene.
I think that there are some people that were freshly here. This is things that New Age people in Los Angeles talk about at parties.
Okay. No, I'm not privy to that. Yeah. I'm in New Jersey. We don't. There's no.
You don't want to talk about that shit in New Jersey unless you know who you're talking to. Yeah. But some people are fresh. Some people haven't been around the wheel as many times, haven't been reincarnated as many, or something like that. But I don't know.
If that's true, I wish it was a little more like
obvious?
like a little bit more, like almost like Star Wars, like ancestral spirit talking to you.
I know, right? Yeah,
because it's kind of disappointing. Like, if deja vu is the only residue of reincarnation, it's really not.
It's not good enough.
You're basically starting over every single time.
You are starting over every single time, and I don't remember past lives. But
are you saying that like people who do?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of people who can tell you about stuff like that, and there's all like weird metaphysical incidents of little kids saying weird shit. and stuff like that, you know? And I generally get the sense that like when you see like little babies, they're like, oh, fuck, not again. Ah, that's like the whole vibe that they give off.
It's true.
But yeah, I think some people are more sure of it. I'm just sure that it's true. It's just like kind of like how I view my mortality or something like that. But yeah, I don't know what trick of consciousness or what mental disease I have that makes me think that that's true, whatever. But it just seems true to me. But people have a lot of other really inconvenient beliefs, you know.
Well, it sounds like a great way to have a lot of ideas, though.
Yeah.
You have this compounding fractal at work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I see if you look at Skipper Beeby, and there is this fractal repetition, density, compounding thing going on in the newer work that I really like. You know, there's this sense of, I don't even know how to word. That's all I can say. There's this repetition, and it does feel like it's in beyond time to me.
I'm glad that kind of like comes through.
I think it has to come through. I don't think like you'd have to be illiterate in some sense to not see that from a formal sense that there's this resonance that is almost musical. I mean, I think a lot of good comics, especially art comics, are a little more overtly musical in their framing and in the way that you can kind of clearly see the parts playing off each other.
Yeah, and pacing and speed and color and that kind of stuff, you know.
Whereas, like, I look at like Spawn or something, and I'm like, I can kind of.
It sounds like this.
That's true. I never thought about what it Spawn would sound like. It's like Limp Bizkit. It can be close to that.
It's like the movies. They're loud. It's funny. A lot of those comics, I can't read the superhero comics like contemporary. I can't even tell what's going on in contemporary mainstream comics. It's so weird to me because I'm so versed in reading comic books. I'm like, what are they talking about? And wait, the words are over here. What is that a picture of? Oh, it's his arm close up punching a guy. What is it? Like they're really hard to decipher. It's very confusing. And I don't look at them very often, and I'll be like, what is this?
It's true. It's a different vernacular.
They've really dug into their own language with them.
Yeah. They push it.
They push all of they're tough. They're pushing it. They're on the edge.
I think they're often just, I don't know. They're cinematic. They're competing with the cinematic.
I haven't checked in lately to see why they still exist, but I know that it's important that they do. But it seems like something that would really kind of fizzle out. But they come out every Wednesday and people want to read them.
Fair point. They're like,
digitally or not.
They are, to bring it back to the Matrix, they're just being farmed. Like the comics are just being farmed by the movie industry, and they need to find the right one, you know, to then make into a movie. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the fodder to pull from.
Yeah, and I think that's the subservient. Because I've seen them recently, and I'm like, oh, they've made comic books, every single character in every single one of these movies, new ones. There's a new comic about this character. The Star Wars ones blew my mind. Every single one of those new characters. Darth Vader comic book. The title, Darth Vader, issue 300,000 million in one. I was like, what? Boba Fett magazine. Yeah. It was. It's not even those. It was all the. Yeah, it's a lot.
I've read some Boba Fett.
I don't know why I'm talking about these kind of spending our time talking about the aliens. There's a bunch of aliens comics. Oh, What If Aliens? That's it. What If Aliens? Which to me was really, that's a lot.
What do you mean?
As a nerd, that's a lot of nerddom put into, and I just look at it, I'm like, well, I understand that concept. I'm a nerd. What If Aliens? Well, written by Paul Reiser, starring the character that he plays in Alien, which I don't know. I'm not that enough of a nerd to know I don't really remember he was in those movies or exactly who he is, but I recognize his name. What If Aliens?
This is real, or you just
this is real in that it's my description of kind of, I guess, what mainstream comics are. I was in
Okay.
sort of a very large mainstream comic book store recently and hadn't looked at what they had. But above the giant shelf of every single character from the new Star Wars comics movies, yeah. What if aliens?
What if?
Why am I wasting time talking about that? Yeah.
I don't know. It's just the nature of the whole thing.
Talk about comic books, yes.
What ifs have always been.
What if aliens? Yeah.
Are we talking about aliens? Like,
Yeah, aliens like the movies, and then like sort of a series about different scenarios that could have happened along the lines of any of those movies. What if Winona Ryder wasn't in that one? What if?
if it was a different actress?
Exactly.
What if?
Or I'm trying to think of what the classic what ifs. There's a perfect example of what I watched on television. I watched all the What If TV show. It was awesome. And I don't remember anything about it, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
Well, you're all about these multiverses. This is effectively that.
Yeah, that's why they have it. That's what it's all about. Those movies have some like deep, those TV, all the Marvel stuff. There's like this crazy Jack Kirby stuff way in it and everything. You know, they don't make it look like Jack Kirby, which everyone would love, but they're mining. Really
You can only
come
come by one universe so much.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they have to splinter off endlessly.
And the robots are going to start writing them all for themselves any moment now, right?
I think they're already doing it.
Yeah. They already did it. They're bored with it already, probably.
I mean, I'm bored with it.
I know. I'm not excited about it.
I don't think one can even think about it.
I've just, since the very beginning, I thought computers were stupid and really got in the way of everything. The whole way through. I know we're talking through a computer. It's very convenient what we're doing right now, but it's just been one stupid thing after another that they invent. So every time they're like, here's the new thing, I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. You're going to force it on all of us. But
it's going to work.
But I was around when they were like, it's a typewriter on a television. You're like, why would I want to use a typewriter on a television? Because then you can print it out in these little dots. It kind of looks like letters. Why would I want to do that? So you can write a letter to your grandma. I already did while you were telling me about how to use this television with little green letters on it. They've just been stupid all the way through.
Yeah, they are kind of, I mean, they think in binary. They're kind of stupid in a certain way.
Yeah.
There is this interesting, like, personal letter that Marshall McLuhan wrote to someone in which he states that he thinks electricity is satanic. And and I think about that often, like as if like as if we were not supposed to take that or harness that in like some Promethean sense. Like it is weird because there's electricity in us too. So there's like electrical current. So it's almost
like Satan.
Exactly.
I don't know. I find one of the most interesting things about being Catholic is the topic of Satan. Because the other Christians like really went crazy with it, and it doesn't seem like it's that important to us. I was afraid of God. They put the fear of God into you. I didn't feel like we needed the devil to be afraid of. You know, the weird guy that are boys were up there on the thing way above you and wearing black. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think Satan is almost like, you know, the interesting thing about Christianity is that everything is incarnated.
Yeah.
And
well,
so
Satan Lucifer is the light bringer after all.
Exactly. And yeah, it's very complicated, very poetic.
Electricity, you know, the cell phones, the apple on the tree.
I mean, literally, Apple's not hiding this element. It occurred to me like 2 years ago. I don't know how I didn't see it. It's very disturbing that I didn't see it, but
the bite out of the apple. See? Yeah. Satan.
It's right there.
It's right there. Yeah. Electricity is satanic. Yeah. And the mark of the beast is these weird machines. Yeah. They're going to take us down.
We'll see.
What? We'll see.
We'll see.
I think humans will destroy themselves. Fine enough. We don't need the machines. They'll help us.
Yeah, they're aiding us.
They are aiding us. They'll give us whatever we want, just like Satan. wherever we dream up. What if? Can you make me that what if computer? Here it is. I don't know. I think
Lord.
What if AI like the real the intensity of like people talking into their phones and then getting the movie they want thing is going to be really funny when it first starts next year. Where you're just like, I want to watch this. I already read about it. Yeah. They've already done it, right? With like rom-coms. They're just going to have like a rom-com prompt. You're like, I want to see Ashton Kutcher in a movie with so-and-so and it ends like this. And they're just going to do it.
Oh, I didn't know about this, but yeah, that makes sense.
They've already, and like you said, they already got it. They've already done it. But that should be very funny.
Imagine the what if comics it could generate. It's endless, honestly. You could make that's really all it's good for, basically.
That's why I'm glad I got my ghost. I've just got this ghost of myself talking to me. I'm just going to chill with him. Get around all this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you've made it pretty far.
Yeah.
Pretty long. Ain't much more if you got to make it through.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing the new work in your lifetime of commitment to the comics. I respect it. I appreciate that.
To the cult of cartooning. To the dedication to the ancient craft. Yes.
Exactly.
I shall not stop. I can't. I will not. I have to make the drawings. I'm not 100% that I have to print them, but it seems, I don't know what else I would do with them. And I do have to keep making them. And I do have to draw all the time. And if I don't, after a certain amount of time, it's not good for me.
Well, yeah, you might as well print them. You might as well collect them.
Might as well collect them and print them. Yeah.
And send them out.
And send them on out.
Well, I'm going to go to bed. It's late.
Oh, terrific.
New Jersey.
Uh-huh. Well, thanks for talking with me. Have a good day.
Yeah, me too. Music by Dory Bavarsky and Ming-Jit Chen. I don't know who's next. Let's see what happens.